Hi besties, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Rachel and welcome to my January wrap up, the first wrap up of 2024. Guys, I'm just gonna tell you right now, I had such a good reading month. I did not have any 5-star reads, but I am coming off of January feeling so good. I feel like I read so many really fantastic books. I have quite a few 4 stars here. I did some fun rereads. I started some new series that I feel like have so much potential, and I walk away from January feeling very good, feeling very full of hope for an amazing reading year in 2024. So it was just such a great month to kick off the year with. So let's get straight into it. These are the 13 books that I read in January. So the very first book that I read in 2024 was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. So this was a Libby hold that just happened to come in like on January 1st. I reserved the hold so long ago and it finally came in. So I was like, you know what? We're gonna start the year with Britney. So if you don't know, this is of course Britney Spears' memoir, and I was a huge Britney fan growing up. I grew up in the early 2000s, obviously, and she was just so iconic, such a big part of my childhood and pop culture. It's hard to talk about this book because I enjoyed my listening experience. I really did. I learned a lot more about her, but I walk away from this memoir just feeling sad. I think that 99% of the people in her life failed her, and she is just such a sweet and special person, and it made me really sad. It was a very kind of like somber listening experience, but I'm also so glad that I did listen to it. I just found a lot of the things that she went through to be so terrible, and while I did know some of those things, I didn't know all of them, and I think it also really highlights just how terrible the media was, particularly to young women at that time. And I don't know, it's just a weird one to talk about. I enjoyed listening to it. I finished it in one day. I could not stop listening, but I also walked away just feeling sad, feeling so much love for her. I didn't give it a rating because I don't really like to give ratings to memoirs, but I enjoyed myself, but it does make me feel sad. I'm really glad that I listened to this though. I think that even if you're not like the biggest Britney fan, I think that if you grew up during that time, I think it's a really fascinating listen, and just kind of looking at the culture in the US surrounding celebrities and just pop culture and all of that. So yeah, it was a really good experience, but definitely made me very emotional. The second book that I read in 2024, and my first like proper fiction novel, was Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is the first book in the Kindred's Curse saga, which is a fantasy romance series. It is self-published. It's on KU, and I loved this. I had so much fun with this book, and the series as a whole just has me really excited. So we follow DM, who is a human girl. She is a healer just trying to survive. She lives in a human village that is surrounded by these beings called the Descendants, which are basically descended from gods. They all have different magical powers, and unfortunately for the humans, it is a very rough time living amongst these beings because there is definitely an imbalance in power and equality and how they are treated. But our girl DM, after her mom goes missing, she kind of gets embroiled in a bit of a rebellion. She starts to interact with some of these descended royalty, and she just sort of gets in for a lot more than she bargained for. We have some hidden powers. We have a bit of a love triangle, sort of. I think that the love triangle is done really well, and it's just like very slow burn, so that's why I'm kind of like wishy-washy on whether I want to call it a love triangle or not. But I think that this book was so much fun, and I really loved the characters. Our main character DM has a lot of humor, a lot of wit, and I really enjoyed being in her head. I also think one of the strengths of this book is there is just a lot more going on than the romance. I feel like sometimes in a fantasy romance we have like a fun romance and it's cute and they're enemies to lovers and whatever, but then the plot itself is really not making sense and really not beefed up in a way that I would like. But I actually think that the plot is like really good, and I think that the world building has been done pretty well, and I'm excited by all of that. And I'm actually currently reading the second book, and I will say that that stands as the series has gone on. I feel like we are building things up even more to create an interesting plot line, an interesting world, and then also a very wonderful slow burn romance. So I really love this. 10 out of 10 recommend. It's a 4-star for me, and I just feel like this series has so much potential. The next book that I wanted to talk about in my January wrap up is The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. I had so much fun with this. I did vlog my experience with this, and if you saw that, you know how excited I was. This was once again a very strong 4-star read for me. It is a fantasy romance. It is literally Pirates of the Caribbean plus a dark fae fantasy romance. Our main character is a fae. She gets kidnapped by another dark evil sea fae, and they have a really great enemies to lovers arc, and I absolutely loved it. It does end in a cliffhanger. The second book, The Ever Queen, did just come out. I definitely want to get to that soon, but I think the story had really atmospheric writing, like very salty sea kind of vibes, and a lot of it takes place on a ship, and I just really enjoyed that imagery. I liked this author's writing, and then I thought that the romance was done really well. I feel like we did establish establish a good enemies to lovers arc. I feel like they have reason to dislike each other. It feels believable, it feels real, and I felt that their progression to lovers felt natural. So I really, really loved this. Once again, another stunning fantasy romance, and I'm super excited to read more from this author. She does have a prequel series that is complete. It's like a 9-book series. You don't have to read that to read this, but I definitely think that I want to go back and read that whole series because I've also heard good things about that. The next book that I read in January is The Traitor Queen by Danielle L. Jensen. So this is the second book in the Bridge Kingdom series. I read The Bridge Kingdom like 3 years ago and I thought it was fine. I thought it was average. I think I gave it 3 stars and I was like, okay, I'm done with the series. I'm not really interested in picking up anything else by this author, but I have had many of you tell me, no, please keep going with the Bridge Kingdom series. It just gets better and better. And as always, you guys were right. This was fantastic. I almost gave this 5 stars. When I was reading the first half of the book, I was like overwhelmed with the feeling of, oh my God, I can't believe that I almost did not read this book. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to go too much into what happens in this book, but the Bridge Kingdom series is an enemies to lovers fantasy romance, and our main character is an assassin princess who is sent to kill this king from another kingdom, but the two of them end up falling in love, of course, and it is like a fun setup, but I just found that I wasn't super intrigued, I wasn't super locked into the story in the Bridge Kingdom. But here, things really picked up and things were really, really action-packed. I did end up giving it 4 stars just because I felt that the second half of the book was a little bit less interesting, and I do think that the conflict kind of wrapped up a little bit quick for me. I wish that we had gotten a bit more, but super strong still. I really enjoyed it. I like the characters a lot more in this book compared to the Bridge Kingdom. I just think that the series really hit its stride here, and I have been told so many times that the next book, which is The Inadequate Heir, is like even better and fantastic. That is going on my March TBR because I just need to read it and see what it is all about. I'm super excited about it, but this was really strong and I'm so happy that I did not end up like fully DNFing the Bridge Kingdom series because I loved my reading experience. I had so much fun with this. The next book that I read in January was Wildfire by Hannah Grace. So this is a situation where kind of the same thing with the Britney Spears memoir. I requested this on Libby months ago and it just happened to come in January and I was like, you know what? Why don't I listen to this? Why don't we see what this is all about? And this is the second book in the Maple Hills like series, which is interconnected standalones of contemporary romances. The first book is Icebreaker, which was a very, very popular, well-loved book that came out, I think last year. And I read Icebreaker and I gave it 3 stars. It was okay, but I felt like there was a lot of potential there, so that's why I wanted to pick up Wildfire, which is the second book. I also like the premise of this book a little bit more. It does take place at a summer camp, which I think is an amazing setting for anything. The Parent Trap is one of my favorite movies of all time, and the scenes at the summer camp stick out to me like the most. So when I heard that this was set at a summer camp, I was like, okay, I want to try this out. This book follows 2 characters who end up having a one-night stand, and then they kind of just stop talking to one another, and then both end up being counselors at a summer camp, and they sort of develop this friends to lovers dynamic. While all of that is great and fun, I think that I just don't click with Hannah Grace's writing. I don't really like the way that she writes dialogue. I don't feel very moved by the romance in both of her books, and I think that it's just a situation where I've discovered that I just might not be her audience. We just don't click for whatever reason. I've tried 2 of her books and I ended up giving this one a 2.5 star rating. I just didn't really feel anything while reading this, except very strangely during the epilogue I did tear up, which shocked me because I was like, okay, 2.5 stars, like I'm ready for this book to be over, and then the epilogue just smacked me in the face. I thought it was really sweet. I don't think that this is a bad book. I think that like it's just not for me. So 2.5 stars. I don't think I'm gonna pick up anything else by Hannah Grace, but the Hannah Grace girlies look like they're having so much fun, and I'm happy for you guys because I do really like the idea of this book. It's just not for me. The next book that I read in January is A Kingdom This Cursed and Empty by Stasia Stark. This is the second book in the Kingdom of Lies series. All of these series names are so confusing. But once again, we have an indie fantasy romance. Our main character has hidden magic powers that could get her killed in the first book, so she has to run away from her village. She ends up teaming up with this group of mercenaries, and their friendship ends up being mutually beneficial, and our main character ends up going into Magic Being's kingdom, getting embroiled in some court politics, and then having an enemies to lovers romance with one of the mercenaries that she meets towards the beginning of the book. And this is the second book. Not really going to talk about what happened in this, but I gave this 3 stars. I enjoyed myself. I had fun with this, but I do think that I just felt much more excitement and I was more engaged in the first book. I think what did bring this book down a little bit for me is there is sort of that romance dynamic of you omitted something from me and now I can never trust you, but like we know that they're going to end up working together, and I don't know, I think I just see that so much, and sometimes the way that it's done is okay. If it's short-lived, if it's quick, if there's some like maturity found somewhere, I can be okay with it, but I did just think that that dragged the beginning of this book a little bit. But thankfully we had some really great side characters in this book that brought some levity to the situation, which I appreciate, and the ending of this book was so good. It is wild. It is crazy. I am definitely going to continue on with this series. I think the series as a whole, it's not like, oh my god, absolutely fantastic, 5-star, ruined my life type of series, but it's fun and I do like the characters and I do want to see this series through. So it's one that I will definitely finish, and I do have hope that the third book will be even better. The next book I read in January was White Horse, Black Knight by Evie Marceau, another fantasy romance, and this is a bodyguard romance, which had me really, really excited about this book. In this book, we have a noblewoman who ends up getting married off to this very notorious lord, and he sends his bodyguard to pick her up. She has to ride on a horse naked across the countryside and make it to her new husband, but along the way she does fall in love with this bodyguard. I was like so here for some moments of this book and then so not here for other moments of this book, and really where this book lost me was I feel like this was such a lust-driven romance and things were just moving so quickly between them and like making these huge just like love proclamations, and like I would burn the world down for her and I'm like, you guys met a week ago, like what is going on? So I didn't buy the romance. I wasn't into it, and also just very, as I said, like focused on lust, which like we love spice, absolutely. I really enjoy having spice in romances, but I want it to feel earned, and I just don't feel like the intensity of their feelings and just all of that really was earned. So this was okay. It was a 3-star. I'm not going to continue on with the series because the fact that the romance moved this fast in book 1, I just don't really see a ton of potential for the rest of the series with that, but it was all right. And I do really like the bodyguard trope. I wish that I saw it more in fantasy romance, but this was just like an average time. And then I read Off the Grid by Kay Bromberg. This was just like a random, I want to read an F1 romance moment I had, and I did not really end up liking this book, unfortunately. God, I feel like I read this so long ago, but I literally only read it a couple weeks ago. So as I said, Formula One sports romance, which I really love the idea of that. I love F1. I like seeing it in romance novels, and I think that one good thing I will say about this book is I do think the author really, really knew F1 and was very good about describing the sport, and it felt very realistic and set in reality, which I enjoyed. I just honestly did not like our love interest. I actually thought that he was like rude to our female main character, a little bit like misogynistic at times, and just I was never really rooting for him. And I also think that the female main character, I liked her, I wasn't like obsessed, but I enjoyed her, but her love interest was just like not one I wanted to root for. Her friends were like kind of rude to her, and I don't know. The whole book just gave me such a weird vibe, and the most important thing, of course, is the romance, and I did not feel the romance between them. By the end of the book, I was like, I don't want these two to end up together. I don't think they're a good match, and I think that the male love interest was, as I said, immature. I think he was rude at times, and I just didn't get him the way that I think I was supposed to. So 2-star read for me. I think that I am discovering contemporary romance and I have such a tumultuous relationship because Magnolia Parks is really fantastic, and like the Chestnut Springs series is really fantastic, but I feel like every time I pick up a contemporary romance, I don't know, it just doesn't really work. And I DNF'd like 4 contemporary romances in December, and I didn't even talk about them because I was just like, I barely started them. I just immediately was like, nope, not for me. And I do have success with contemporary romance sometimes, but for whatever reason, I don't know. When I try these random one-off contemporaries, they just don't really work for me. Once again, I think what's really cool about reading is you're constantly just learning your taste more and more, and I think I'm just really discovering that contemporary romance is something that I have a hard time finding what I like. I don't know if I'm super picky. I don't know what the problem is, but I think that I am definitely going to be just like taking a break from contemporary until it is an author that I just like feel very confident in, that I will really, really love. So I don't know, been discovering that about myself lately, and it's interesting. This is a fantasy romance channel for a reason, let's just say. The next book that I read in January was Falling Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. This is a YA fantasy series, and I think it came out in like 2012, 2013. I have heard a lot about it. I've heard a few of my friends really gush about this, and I did really enjoy myself. It's a multi-POV fantasy. It does say like YA fantasy, Game of Thrones-esque, and I would agree with that to a point. There's definitely just like a bunch of different kingdoms, obviously trying to take over one another, take over land. There's all these internal conflicts and court politics, and I thought that this was really fun. I'm giving it like a high 3 stars. I think that there's a lot of potential, and I'm definitely going to continue on with the series. I just didn't feel like super overwhelmed with the writing style or the character dynamics or anything like that. I thought that it was good, but I wanted a little bit more, and I know that I can get a little bit more from other YA fantasy series, so maybe as this one goes on, I will like it more and more. I don't think it's bad at all. I thought that it was good and entertaining, but I don't know, I don't feel really like I have much else to say. I enjoyed myself. It didn't like change my life, but I am definitely curious in what the rest of the series has in store for me. All right, and then the next book that I read in January was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the conclusion to the Divine Rivals duology. Is that the name of it? I don't really know. You guys, I was disappointed by this, and that makes me really sad because Roman and Iris are lovely characters. They are 5-star characters to me. They are fantastic, and their romance, especially in Divine Rivals, was so good. This, unfortunately, was not, I think, what I thought it was gonna be, and I was a little bit disappointed. I'm gonna keep it brief, but my thoughts are essentially, we did not get enough Roman and Iris in this book, and I think we kind of knew that going in with how Divine Rivals ended, but I did not feel this, like, when I read Divine Rivals, I felt like consumed by their romance. I really did. I could not get enough of them. In this book, I just didn't feel that way. I feel like I lost a little bit of that magic. And then we focused a lot on the plot, like the war and the gods, and a lot of that just didn't really make sense to me. I felt like Enva and Dacre, if that's how you pronounce it, they felt like weird sort of immortal beings. They just didn't really feel all that powerful or all that interesting. And then a lot of the things that happened in this book to like conclude the war, I'm like, I feel like we could have done this at any time. Like, why now? I was very, very confused by the fantasy elements in this book and the plot line and like the reasoning for things. We focused so much on that in this book. Truly, it took over a huge chunk of the book, and I'm here for Roman and Iris. So I think that if we had had more of them in this book, I might have been willing to like overlook some of those things. I just didn't really find those elements compelling, and I feel like they just took over so much of the story. And then Roman and Iris, their amazing romance that I fell in love with in Divine Rivals, I just don't feel like was as strong here. So I'm giving this 3 stars, and I'm a little bit disappointed by it, but I do think overall this is like a good duology. I just think that this was a bit of a weak ending. All right, so next up I have a couple of rereads, and then of course my most anticipated book of the year I did read in January. So let's start off with the rereads. Number 1, I reread A Court of Silver Flames. I think this is my 4th round with A Court of Silver Flames, and I loved it. 5 stars, absolutely amazing. I love Nesta so much. She is my favorite character in the ACOTAR series. She is probably like my 2nd favorite SJM character of all time. There's one other character that I love a little bit more, but she is just such a fantastic character. I think super well written, super interesting, and I just love this book so much. We focus so much on mental health and healing. We focus a lot on female friendship, and there's a lot of amazing world building that happens in this book. Like the second half of this book, I was just like blown away with everything that Sarah was doing. I think setting up for future ACOTAR books, I think, are going to be really fantastic with the plot lines that she is setting up, and just seeing Nesta at the forefront, at the helm, healing, getting into her head. I find her so relatable, and I just absolutely love her. So 5-star book. I do have a couple issues with this book, but this is like an overwhelming 5-star for me. I just love it so much that I don't really care about the other issues that I have with it, honestly. So yeah, 5-star for the amazing emotions and feelings that this book gives me. Then next up, I did a reread of House of Sky and Breath, the 2nd book in the Crescent City series. This is my 3rd time reading this book, and this book is perfection. I have no notes. I have not a singular negative thing to say about this book. This book is perfect to me. I love the Crescent City series. That is no secret here. The 1st book in this series, House of Earth and Blood, that is my favorite book of all time. I'm locking my answer in. It is just incredible, and I think this is an amazing follow-up to that 1st book. We get so much world building, so much information, so much history. Look, this is a long book. It could have been like 300 more pages. I loved every single second of it. I was talking about this with my friend Lachlan, and we just don't feel bored for a moment in the 1st and 2nd book, like, and then especially in House of Sky and Breath. There is not a moment in this book that I'm like, oh God, I just want to get through this part, or oh, I wish that this happened a little bit differently, which I feel like you can still love a book and still give it 5 stars, but have, you know, a couple of issues with it. But this is a case where truly I love this book so much. I love the characters, Rune Danon, Crown Prince of the Valbaran Fae. Thank you very much. Everything about this book is so much fun. The action is incredible. The adventure, the like reveals that we get in this book, obviously, like, where were you when you finished this book? That is a core memory I will be thinking about for the rest of my life. This book is just so special to me and so much fun, and I just think it is absolute perfection. This book is amazing to me. All right, and the very last book that I read in January is of course none other than House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas. This is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series, and this is not the finale of the Crescent City series. Sarah did confirm we will get more Crescent City books at some point, but this does conclude Bryce and Hunt's kind of main storyline. So I'm not going to spoil anything, and I'm honestly not even going to talk too much about this because I did film an hour-long spoilery reading vlog for this book, so you can get all of my thoughts there, but I had so much fun reading this. Oh my God. I had the time of my life. I cried. I was so happy. I was overwhelmed with joy while reading this book. I seriously had such an incredible reading experience. I am really satisfied with the way that things wrapped up. I am really satisfied with the way that things were done. I did end up giving this book a 4.5 stars, so not quite a 5 star. I always say though, I feel like Sarah's books hit hit better on a reread, so I'll be curious to see how I feel on a reread. But there were a few things that I wish were done a little bit differently or just wrapped up in a different way, or I wanted more. But once again, it's one of those situations where I do feel very overwhelmed by the things that I loved in this book. I still have like 99% nothing but super positive things to say about this. I really love these characters, and there was so many just amazing scenes in this book. Oh my god. So I really had a great time, and this is a very strong 4.5-star book for me. All right, my friends, so that is going to be it for my January wrap up. If you made it to this point in the video and you wanted to let me know, go ahead and leave the lightning bolt emoji. Please make sure that you're following me on Instagram and Goodreads. They are always linked down below, and I really appreciate that you watched this video. I hope that you're having a fantastic day. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you all in the next one.